Hello again and welcome back to the channel. Before we get going with this week's video, we'd just like to remind you to click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, and if you're enjoying our content, give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment. We love to hear from our viewers. Today we find ourselves at Bolton Castle in North Yorkshire, an imposing medieval castle sitting in the North Yorkshire Dales. It was built between 1378 and 1399 by Richard, 1st Baron Scrope of Bolton, and is reputed to have cost 18,000 marks to build. It remained in the Scrope name until 1630, when Emmanuel Scrope, 1st Earl of Sunderland, died with no legitimate heirs, and the castle was inherited by the eldest of his illegitimate daughters. Perhaps the most notable Scrope to live here, however, was one Henry Scrope, 9th Baron Scrope of Bolton, who kept Mary Queen of Scots under house arrest here for 6 months in 1568. Henry was a loyal supporter of Queen Elizabeth I, despite coming from a Catholic family. He was Warden of the West Marches and Captain of Carlisle Castle from 1562 until he died in 1592. In 1569, as Captain of Carlisle, he was involved in the suppression of the Rising of the North, an unsuccessful attempt by Catholic nobles from the north of England to depose Queen Elizabeth I and replace her with her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots. This demonstrated just how loyal to the English Queen he was. In 1584, he was made a Knight of the Garter. Right, so, now you've caught me, I've come to the granary and the kitchen, and it's a plaque, so I'll read from it. So it says that the castle was in use before the mess kitchen and great kitchen were built, and an earlier kitchen would have needed butteries. But this was probably the original use for the rooms you now stand in. We stand in. However, the chutes in the floors leading down to the meal house and bakehouse below indicate their later purpose as malting house and granary. Another plaque, and this time we're in the Archers' garrison. Quite a nice atmospheric little nook. See what it says. The furniture, clothing and equipment shown here are similar to those used at the time of the Battle of Flodden Field, when Henry, 7th Lord of Scrope of Bolton, was captain of the Wensleydale Archers. This poem was written about him and his archers at the time. Lord Scrope of Bolton, stern and stout on horseback, who had not his peer, no Englishman Scots more did doubt. With him did wend all Wensleydale, from Morton unto Moylesdale Moor. All they that dwelt by the banks of the Swale with him were bent in harness stour, from where But what of Mary, Queen of Scots? Recently widowed from her husband Francis, the Dauphin of France, Mary had returned to Scotland to resume her reign there. Her time there was turbulent to say the least, and saw her remarry twice, her second husband being murdered, allegedly, by her third, one James Hepburn, 4th Earl Bothwell. We speak of this relationship in our video on Hermitage Castle, which we will link above. Shortly after this marriage took place, her popularity had dwindled and her reign had become so controversial that she was forced to abdicate. There was an uprising against her, and after having lost the Battle of Langside, she fled in a fishing boat across the Solway Firth to Workington in Cumberland. After a night spent at Workington Hall, she was escorted by various dignitaries to Carlisle Castle, where she was met by its captain, Henry Scrope, and his friend Sir Francis Knollys. Carlisle was soon deemed an unsuitable abode for her, however, and she was taken to Scrope's home, Bolton Castle, where she was given his apartments in the southwest tower. Although, in theory, Mary was in fact a prisoner of Queen Elizabeth, who perceived her, quite rightly, as a threat to the throne, her life at Bolton Castle was hardly that of a typical convict. She had with her many servants, for example, including 30 of her men and 6 ladies-in-waiting, all of whom were accommodated at the castle. She even had her own hairdresser, one Mary Seaton, and was allowed to wander the lands surrounding the castle and go hunting. For the most part, her keeper at Bolton was Sir Francis Knollys, who had assessed security before her arrival and stated, "The house appeareth to be very strong, very fair, and very stately, after the old manner of building, and is the highest walled house I have seen, and has but one entrance hereto." Francis also taught Mary English, as the only languages she spoke were Scots, French, and Latin. She was kept at Bolton for 6 months in total, after which she was moved to Tutbury. Queen Elizabeth proceeded to hold Mary prisoner at various castles for a further 18.5 years, before finally having her beheaded at Fotheringay Castle in 1587 for plotting the Queen's assassination.
Okay, so let's read some information about the dungeon that we find ourselves in now then. And it says, "This cold, dark pit, hewn out of solid rock, was where any unfortunate prisoners would have been kept. There are very few records to show us who was locked up here and why. It was unlikely that many people would have been thrown into such pits. Prisoners may have been awaiting trial, often at the assizes at York." It says, and it goes on to say, "or have been imprisoned as punishment for a more serious misdemeanor. This dungeon is less than 4 meters long by 3 wide and about 3.5 meters deep. The only comfort offered by the accommodation was an ensuite garde-robe." Garde-robe.
If you've watched our video on Hermitage Castle, you'll know that Mary's ghost is said to haunt there. Well, unsurprisingly perhaps, she has been spotted wandering around Bolton Castle with one of her ladies-in-waiting. There have allegedly been several sightings of 2 ladies, one in a dark hooded cloak and the other in a light-coloured cloak, walking in the castle grounds. Also, the current Lord Bolton himself had a spooky encounter. He was, one afternoon, locking up the castle for the day when he spotted a lady in a dark coat across the courtyard, walking into the east curtain. He waited for 5 minutes, assuming she was a late visitor, but she failed to reappear. He went to the east curtain to find her, but she had completely disappeared. It is also said that heavy footsteps can be heard on the upper floors when no one is there, and Lindsay herself had an odd experience in Lord Scrope's chamber. She was having technical difficulties with her camera and was cursing it out loud, but subsequently wondered about the wisdom of cursing in the Lord's chamber, so apologized out loud. "Sorry, Lord Scrope." Immediately afterward, there were 3 loud knocks on the floorboards. Try as she might to replicate these knocks by walking across the same piece of floor, she couldn't. Could the knocks have been a reprimand by Henry Scrope? Or maybe even Mary, Queen of Scots herself? We will never know. Well, this is an amazing room. Oh, look, there's a plaque. And it says, "Ground floor where you are now standing," or where we're now standing, "was once the guard room where soldiers would have been on duty guarding the great portcullis. When the castle was first built, this would have been the only way in and out of the building." Right, so I'm just going to go down to the courtyard and we'll see what's going on there, shall we? Hey, let's see. Got to be careful with this. It's always a way. God. Not good with the stairs, but let's carry on. Yeah. Okay.